We are in Aspen with Jeff Bezos. He is, as you know, the chairman and CEO of Amazon.com. After founding the company in 1995, he helped grow Amazon into one of the most powerful brands on the internet. While Amazon began as a fledgling bookstore, it is now an online superstore selling everything from electronics to outdoor grills. Over the last several years, the company has dedicated its energy to growing rapidly. It is now focusing more on becoming profitable by improving execution and cutting costs. I'm pleased to have Jeff Bezos back on this program. I don't know where to start, but just sort of give me it wasn't a year or so ago, 2 years ago, you were Time Magazine's Man of the Year. What are you this year?
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God? Oh, that's interesting. Time Magazine to God. Yeah.
It's internet poster boy to internet pinata in 12 months, Charlie. That's what it is.
Not an easy thing to do.
Not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how's business.
Actually, the business is better than ever, and this is one of the things that I think is so hard for people who are sort of seeing it from the outside to really understand and internalize. But if you look at 1999, which is the year that the stock was booming, we had 14 million customers shop with Amazon. In the year 2000, when the stock was busting, we had 20 million people shop with Amazon. So, and you know, it could be because we're now sponsors of the Charlie Rose Show, but
there's a direct connection.
There's clearly a correlation there. I understand.
Yes, at least a correlation.
I'm not sure there's causality, but I know there's correlation. So, but I do believe that it's very
Just
difficult.
Stick with me, and we'll find out.
For people to sort of separate the stock prices of internet companies, which have obviously come way off their highs, and the fundamentals of some of those companies, which are actually getting better and better.
What are the fundamentals of Amazon, and how are they getting better and better?
Well, for example, in Q4 of '99, when our stock was at or near its peak, we had an operating loss of 26% of sales. A year later, when the stock was near its 52-week low, we had an operating loss of 7% of sales. So the operating loss got much better. The number of customers I just mentioned before, another metric that got much better. You can basically go through and look at just about every important operating metric in the company, and they've all improved.
When you define in your mind what Amazon is and what it's becoming.
So the mission we have, which is at the top level, the one thing that I think won't change 10 years from now, 20 years from now, is Earth's most customer-centric company. That's what we're trying to do. Within that, we have a vision, which is to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything that they might want to buy online. That doesn't mean we're going to sell all those things ourselves directly, but it does mean we're going to help people find them. And we've put a lot of effort into personalization tools, search tools, different kinds of discovery tools that help people find products and products find people, which is something you can really only do effectively online.
There are those who take note of the fact that Amazon is a great brand name. And they will say to you, and this comes up, you've heard this more times than you want to hear it, and probably not again at this table, just stay with books and music and video. We don't need to be in the PC business.
Right. Well, Charlie, one of the reasons that we have expanded into these new categories is because our customers have asked us to do it. And you can have a brand name which stands for a particular product category, but in my opinion, that brand will not be as valuable and robust as a brand which stands for something more abstract. So I would claim that the best brands in the world don't stand for a product category. They stand for something at a higher level. And what we want,
a higher level is what?
In our case, what we want Amazon to stand for is starting with the customer and working backwards. So that limits us. For example, when we do things, we have to have some twist. There has to be some innovation. There has to be something where customers are saying, yeah, that's what I would expect from Amazon, that they're doing this in a way, an Amazonian way. But it doesn't limit you to books.
Okay, but then it does limit you to make choices.
Indeed.
I mean, absolutely. And why PC and why not cars? Well, we've talked about cars before. But just take PC because, I mean, to the uninitiated eye, it's a business that's oversaturated. Mm-hmm. It's a business that's very competitive. And it's a business that's on the downside rather than the upside.
Right.
So why do we want to be in that business?
Well, that's a good question. And just for clarification, this is more about how do we choose product categories from a business point of view,
right.
rather than will customers assume that that business fits into our brand name.
Right.
So clearly, I think people will agree now that that our electronics business is growing so rapidly and is the second largest business in the company. People are buying a lot of electronics from us. I encourage your customers, your viewers to do that.
All right, but let me interrupt you. Why you? We'll come right back to the.
Palm Pilots, handspring visors, very cheap these days.
But because of the nature of the market, or
Just
because of. Can you? What kind of relationship do you have with Sony, for example? Sony is a big brand name. Do you have the kind of relationship that an authorized dealer does, that you can offer Sony products competitively?
Well, we do offer products competitively, but in some cases, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're buying them directly from the suppliers. We started our electronics business 2 years ago, and we now are direct with over 340 different electronics suppliers. Right. We have by far the largest selection of electronics online, not just online, but in the world. There's 25,000 different items in our electronics store compared to a huge electronics superstore, which might have 5,000 items. So this kind of selection you can't get unless you do have great relationships with a large number of manufacturers, and we do. But we're so new in the business, over time, we will just very patiently, hopefully, get relationships with every manufacturer.
Give me an example of how it would work.
Well, for example, we have a partnership with Toys R Us. We have another partnership with Borders.
How does it work?
So the way it works, each of these are sort of handcrafted partnerships, so the details vary in each case. But let's take Toys R Us as an example. Toys R Us is practically synonymous with toy selling, not just in the U.S., but really around the world. They're one of the rare global retailers. And they do more than $11 billion a year in sales. So they have so much toy volume, they're very good at buying from the toy manufacturers. So that's their strength. They have found that it's very, very difficult to do online commerce. And so it's as hard as it is to do physical world commerce, which is also hard.
And that's a business you know.
And that's a business that we know. So basically, so we joined with Toys R Us, our toy store. We do all of the e-commerce. So we service the customer. We provide the website technology. We do the fulfillment and shipping. And then Toys R Us does the vendor management. So they're the ones who are deciding which toys to buy and which quantity, which is done in sort of early in the year, in sort of March and April. Guesses made at that time for December when people are actually buying the toys.
Akin to that idea, you also have a new business relationship or partnership. I'm not sure how new it is. I may be 6 months behind again. It is is it Ingram? Is it the book publisher, a distributor, so that you don't get involved in the handling of books at all? So we're not going to ship them from the publisher to a middle person to Amazon. So online, I order from Amazon, and they never come to an Amazon warehouse.
Right. That hasn't started yet. And
is it going to start?
It is going to start, and it's going to be a very small fraction of the books.
Now, are you pulling back from that is there any reason you're pulling back that you're sensitive to your suppliers or anything like that?
No, it's actually it's a question of competency. So what Ingram is going to be doing for us is initially shipping single books that don't have to be sorted together. Oh. So one of the things we've gotten very good at is if you order 5 books, something that we've gotten very good at is getting all 5 books assembled into one box. That's called sortation. It turns out to be incredibly hard. So what we want to do...
And a logistical nightmare.
An absolute logistical nightmare. That's the kind of thing that we want to be really good at, it's those sortables. Now, when it comes to a single book, one book shipped to one customer, that's a much easier process, and that's something that we feel comfortable with the right quality controls in place, slowly outsourcing. And so we're going to start doing that with Ingram Book Company. They've been a great partner of ours for more than 5 years.
But why isn't it a good economic model for you, if you want to cut costs dramatically, to do more and more of that? So you get out of the handling business, but you become...
Well, so somebody has to do the handling, and whoever's doing it is going to charge you for it. Right. So there can be... Drop shipping can actually save. Drop shipping is when the manufacturer ships directly to the customer on behalf of a third party. So that can save system-wide costs. So that would be real savings. In other words, it doesn't make sense for a manufacturer to ship us a big, heavy item, let's say like a table saw maybe, and then for us to
repackage it
or even just to reship it. So there, you're moving the atoms around too much. Now, drop shipping has long been one of the things we want to do more of, but it is also very, very complicated because most manufacturers don't have an expertise in doing drop shipping. So, if you take a typical publisher in our book business, when we place an order with that publisher, typically they will ship to us in 1 to 2 weeks, which is much too slow of a shipping time for our customers.
I'd say. We want it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so PCs will be sold outside, and you're not going to take the PCs in and ship them out, or not?
No, the PCs will go direct from the suppliers.
Okay. Looking at the experience you've had over the last 3 years, just take 3 years, or the last couple of years, was part of the business plan simply to grow faster? Would you change it in hindsight, 20/20 vision in hindsight? Would you have had a different business model or strategy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we have, for the most part, made the right set of trade-offs. One of the things that you have to know about e-commerce is that it's a scale business. What that means is that it's very, very difficult to be a small or medium-sized e-commerce company.
As many have found out.
As many are finding out. Yeah. So the difficulty there is because they're big fixed cost investments. So you have to write a bunch of software, and it's just as expensive to write that software if 10 customers use it as it is if 20 million customers use it.
In the end, is that, notwithstanding your constant sermon message about customer-centric,
yes,
is that's the genius of your company, you've said, and Amazon's genius, you've always said to me, is customer-centric.
That's right.
Some say that the core competency you have is the best software around.
Well, I certainly think that is one of our core competencies and perhaps even one of our most important. I think the brand name that we've developed over the years would clearly be another. Right. I think the customer base that we have would be another asset that we've developed over the years. I think there are several, but certainly the e-commerce software that powers Amazon is the only demonstrated e-commerce software in the world at that scale. So there really aren't other e-retailers doing that volume of transactions. And it's difficult to build software that scales and is feature-rich. So, it's really, that's been one of our, I think one of the key ways we've built our reputation. And people see the front end, they see the website. I'll tell you the majority of our effort has gone into the software systems on the back end that do customer service, that let customers do self-service.
Distribution?
Distribution and fulfillment, the
inventory
logistics,
control.
That sorting nightmare, which we actually love. We like things to be hard because then you can get competitive advantage from it.
Biggest mistake you've made so far?
Well, I think the biggest mistake that we've made is a couple of years ago, we started investing in a series of smaller and medium-sized e-commerce companies. And of all the companies that perhaps, in hindsight at least, could have known better, probably us, because we did know that the fixed costs of this business were high. Well, I think that one of the things that we were very convinced of, and indeed it was definitely true in the earlier days, is that there was a land rush phase to internet. And so when we saw product categories that we thought were important to our future at some point, but they weren't the ones we were going to do first. So these were things we wanted to do at some point. You can take any of the, pets.com, wine.com. There were a bunch of things that we were invested in that didn't work out. And but we knew we weren't going to do those things anytime soon, but we wanted placeholders in those industries so that later, perhaps we could fold those companies back into Amazon.com. So that was driven by a mentality which was a land rush mentality. And I think it's hard to put a precise date on it, but I believe that, for the first few years of our existence, that land rush mentality was correct. And the only reason that we exist today is because we behaved.
Because you were first among the land rush mentality.
And we really behaved that way. But that started to transition at a certain point, and we didn't see it at the time it transitioned, and it took us a couple years too long.
That's all part of Grow Faster, too. I mean, the whole notion of whether the philosophy of Grow Fast, as it's a principal sort of urgency about Amazon in the beginning. When you had that huge market cap, do you wish
That's part of what created the land rush by the way, that not our huge market cap, but the huge market cap of the internet sector. So all these companies could get funded, and that's what created one of the imperatives for moving so quickly, because there were so many startup companies getting, $60 million or more in venture capital, and those companies with that much capital, if that financing environment had continued for any period of time, many of those companies might actually have been able to build the scale to be successful.
It's true or false? If you look at Amazon, the future of Amazon is a question of whether what Amazon has created works in an economic context or not. It's not a question of whether there's somebody doing it better or not.
Right.
I mean, you are, in a sense, if you go down, I mean, e-commerce has what?
Well, then e-commerce should rest easy, Charlie.
But what does it say? E-commerce should rest easy because, but you don't understand the question.
Yeah.
I mean, you are the brand, you are the top of the line for e-commerce.
So the way to think about this, so first of
What
all,
does it say about e-commerce if you can't do it, I guess is my question.
I think that the model has been demonstrated. So if you look at our U.S. books, music, and video business, that business has been profitable for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And
maybe we should have spun that off.
And our electronics business, I think one day is going to be our largest, most profitable businesses.
When you had that huge market cap, do you wish now, in retrospect, that you had gone the AOL route and bought something?
Well, clearly, if you look at it
Omission is the question.
A trading mentality, it would have been a great time to do a trade, right? But we are, I think our company we're much more into sort of building the company organically, building customer experience. That's what people in the company are always thinking about. I mean, it's a strict trader. If a market cap is at a peak,
you're talking about trading stocks. If you've got a stock with a lot of high valuation,
well, I mean, you could
trade it for something
if a
that's
market
more
cap
real.
is very, very high, you could even if just with a trading mentality, you could say, look, let's buy forest land, and then when the market cap comes back down,
we have a solid asset.
Let's sell the forest land. Right? I mean, that's a trading mentality, but it's not what drives our company.
It's not a building mentality.
It's not a building mentality. It's a trading mentality, and there's nothing wrong with that.
But in retrospect.
Well, in retrospect, at that point in time, I think a trader, somebody who is, has a trading mentality, could have created big value for shareholders. I think you see that. I think AOL did a good job.
Bought at the top.
Yeah.
Bought Time Warner 55% at the top.
Sure. There's nothing wrong with that.
Looking at the future, tell me about e-commerce in United Kingdom, Japan, Germany, France, Singapore.
Right. So I think that e-commerce in, take the countries you just mentioned, is on a per capita basis going to be an even bigger deal in those countries ultimately than it will be in the U.S.
Why?
There are a couple reasons. One is that the population density is so high in those countries that delivery gets easy. So, for example, in both Germany and the UK, for more than 90% of addresses in those countries, if you order today with standard shipping, you get your product tomorrow. That's just because in the UK, that's how the Royal Post does it. Because the country is relatively small geographically with a very large population. So that kind of population density leads to inexpensive, fast shipment, which is a good thing if you're an e-commerce company. The second thing that population density does is it drives up real estate costs in major urban areas. So that makes it difficult and expensive to build physical superstores. So, go to Tokyo and try to open a 100,000 square foot superstore.
If you said that 5 years ago, it was impossible. But all values in Tokyo have declined since then.
It's still very, very
too
difficult.
expensive. Yes. So therefore, online has a much more powerful reason for being in Japan, in Tokyo, than it does in.
The relative advantage is
Aspen.
even greater.
Yes.
That's right. I run into lots of good customers
in Aspen. I want to turn to some private and some general questions, but I have to ask two things. One that people frequently speculate about. One is that likely, not likely, never, that you will be acquired by some bricks and mortar company.
Well, we have absolutely no intention of doing anything but building this as an independent, standalone company. We love where we are. We love the relationship we have with our customers. We love the fact that the Wall Street Journal just published a few months ago that we got a customer satisfaction rating of 84, which is the highest ever recorded in any service industry. So we like where we are. We like the economics of our business.
Yeah, but sometimes people can say customer satisfaction, if it comes at the expense of too much cost, is not a good business.
But that actually isn't the case here. I think that can be the case. But we understand our model. We've demonstrated already in books, music, and video. And it's just a matter of time before we demonstrate it in the other product categories as well.
I mentioned the thing about books. I mean, the idea of spinning it off never was an operative idea, simply because even though books, music, and video was profitable, it didn't make sense from a financial engineering standpoint to ever do that.
Well, I would say also, so first of all, I think things done primarily for financial engineering reasons,
stock or something.
Usually, I'm not sure that always works out the way that the people intended. But I will tell you also that that's not, what we want to do is build a cohesive customer experience that helps, when we talk about personalizing the store, we want the sharing of those product categories so that occasionally when you say, people who bought this book also bought this electronics product. So you need that sort of tight integration, in our view of the world. You need that sort of tight integration between product companies. So
can you tell me, suppose I read spy stories, suppose I read American fiction.
Right.
And do I have a signature at Amazon.com so you can suggest to me that this is the kind of appliance I should use or like or prefer?
So if you read a lot of spy stories, you will find that there will be certain electronics items which are more correlated with people who read a lot of spy stories. So we don't have...
So it's just not limited to books.
It's not limited to books. We'll sell you night vision goggles.
Yeah, okay. Let me do one financial question before I go to big general questions. You have said many times, and this is repeated ad nauseum, that at the end of the year 2000, at the beginning of 2000, you had $1 billion in cash on hand. At the end of the year, you'd spend $200 million, and so you'd be left without new financing with $800 million. Is that about right, those numbers?
It's about right. We had $1.1 billion,
right,
and we expect to end the year with about $900 million.
So spending $200 million in a year. So you won't be going for new financing in 2001.
We don't need to. We've always said that we reserve the right to, in the case of that we may want to increase the strength of the balance sheet or for strategic reasons. We always reserve our flexibility, but we've said we don't need to.
So we're not going to be running out of money anytime soon.
No.
All right. The other question that comes up is in terms of this profitability thing that everybody, inevitably, if you talk to you have to ask. It is, you have already pinpointed the last quarter of the year 2001, right? And that is or is not taking and counting the interest that you have to pay on the money you borrowed.
Not counting the interest. So this is a first step for us. What we've set as a goal is a pro forma operating profit this Q4. And so the operating versus net. So a net profit would include the interest expense. Right. An operating profit does not.
So you have an operating profit at the end of this year.
That's what we're going for.
It's a goal, or you're pretty sure about this?
Well, we resisted for 5 years answering that question. So we have a high degree of confidence, but at the same time, whenever I say that, I always tell people that there are no guarantees. There's a lot of work to be done between now and then, but we're on track.
Amazon will be where 3 years from now? 2004.
2004.
Not just in profitability, but as a company and as a picture of a company.
Here's the way I would think about that. One of the things that people underestimate about what will happen, over 3 years, which takes you to 2004, or 6 years, or 10 years, is the amount of change you will see in the foundation that is the technology that runs our store. So one of the things that's totally different about e-commerce from physical world commerce is that real estate doesn't obey Moore's law. So Moore's law
doesn't become obsolete and...
Well, that's true. Yeah. Moore's law says that microprocessor performance doubles for the same price point every 18 months. Right. And that's held true for more than a decade. What you're finding now is that disk space is getting twice as cheap every 12 months, and bandwidth is getting twice as cheap every 9 months. So if you take the bandwidth doubling rate of 9 months and assume that it holds constant for the next 5 years, that means that we can spend the same amount of money on bandwidth per customer that we spend today 5 years from now, but use 60 times as much bandwidth. That's a big, big deal. And by the way, the technology itself doesn't drive the customer experience, but it makes the customer experience possible. Then you layer innovation and invention on top of the technology. So somebody over the next 5 years, and we've got lots of people inside our company, but there'll also be people throughout the world working on these kinds of problems, will figure out ways to use 60 times as much bandwidth to make online shopping even more compelling.
What do you live in terror of, in a sense, in the economic world? A slowing of growth? I mean, so the technology world is hit even harder than it is now?
You know, first of all, I am a dyed-in-the-wool optimist.
Yes. So I've seen a few of you kind of in Silicon Valley. Less and less.
Well, I don't think so. I think that every once in a while the optimists...
Among the family of optimists, more and more, or less and less?
I think the optimists occasionally keep their heads down. but they remain optimists.
Yeah, I know.
And, you know, we live in an era of incredible invention. And what drives the economy is invention at the end of the day. I mean, this is one of the things that, it's a long time ago people thought it was raw materials that drove the economy, and whichever country had more gold was the richest country. That's not true anymore. What drives economies is the education of the people and the innovation that they can then create. And I see a world which is, in part because of the internet, about ready to explode with innovation everywhere. You see...
Give me an example. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is, it used to be that if you were a genius and you lived in India, it was a little bit harder for you to make a significant economic contribution to the world.
Now you're creating the great next software.
But what you do now is you create the great next software, and you do it from wherever you are, and you communicate with the world community of software engineers. This is a big deal. And so if you believe fundamentally, and I do, that innovation is what drives, world prosperity, I'd say hang on to your seat.
You ought to be an optimist then. No, I'm saying, you're saying if you believe in invention because these things are happening.
If you believe in invention, you ought to be an optimist.
No matter how bad the economy, the idea of creativity is not slowing down.
And that doesn't mean...
There's somebody with a dream somewhere that is not affected by...
That's right. And also, don't read this as saying that, that we've broken economic cycles. I mean, there have always been periods of rapid growth and periods of recession.
You think what's happening now is simply an economic cycle?
Or I suspect it's, I think that's probably right. I mean, I think it's hard to know how deep it is and how long it's going to last and so on and so on, but that's highly likely.
Where's Larry Summers when we need him? I mean, excess capacity is a part of a business cycle or not? I don't know. I guess it is.
Sure. Overbuild.
Right.
Based on...
Tara, again, though. I mean, tell me, you clearly have a dream. You drove across the country. You had a dream. You were thinking about what product, but you understood, you believed, you hoped that the possibilities to create something that would have a growing life online would, and you look for the right price, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of the Amazon story. That's part of your story. What could destroy that dream for you in terms of forces out there, in terms of economic, whatever way? What's the terror I'm trying to get back to?
Well, I'll tell you.
I understand the optimism.
Right. The thing that's different now, and when I first met John Doerr, who's the partner at Kleiner Perkins who invested in Amazon.com, the firm that invested, one of the things that he said really stuck with me, and it was, what startup companies do is they take their precious early capital dollars and systematically eliminate risks. That's what they do, the successful ones. And so what people, I think, often get wrong, when you're a startup company, 99% of whether you make it to being a more established company is luck. I mean, this company, Amazon, we've worked incredibly hard. We've cared for our customers. I would put us up against any other company in how much we have bled and sweat for our customers. But we had the planets aligned for us so perfectly in those early days in terms of the timing and many other things, decisions that we made that were poor decisions that turned out to be the right decision anyway. In those early days, that's when the company's destiny is really not in its own control.
Yeah.
At this point in time, with the brand name that we have, which was just rated, for example, even in Japan, where we've just been in the country for 7 months, was rated the 8th most. I think it was some subcategory
attractive,
like
whatever.
Yeah,
right.
So brand in Japan, right behind like
recognized,
Matsushita or something. I mean,
where was Sony in all this?
I think Sony was even higher. But that is, we have so many assets now that now it really is under our control. So we don't worry about externalities now. What we worry about now is that we don't do our job. And I'll tell you, one of the things in this period that I kind of like is that it's a lot easier in the year 2001 for Amazon.com as a company to be humble, working our butts off, than it was in 1999 when the world believed we couldn't lose. We're a company, it's kind of handy to be an underdog.
Two schools of thought. One is that you will become, and Amazon will become, the most spectacular retailer of all time. That's one. Over here is also a school of thought says Amazon may become the most spectacular failure of the internet era. What's the odds for A versus B?
Well, we choose option
100%?
A.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. We get to decide.
Right.
Nobody outside the company can decide that.
And you're happy with that?
I'm very happy.
You're comfortable with that fact?
Absolutely.
Whether we make it this way or that way?
No, there's no this or that, Charlie. It's going to be option A.
Okay. We're in Aspen, Colorado with Jeff Bezos. Back in a moment. Stay with us.